Hello! Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the difference between perennials and annuals and why you may want to switch some of your current landscape and garden over into perennials. So first of all, just the definitions of the two. A perennial plant is one that you plant once and it's going to come back year after year after year. An annual plant you plant once and it basically matures completely throughout 1 year to produce seed, and then it dies off. When we're looking at plants that we usually plant in our gardens, such as tomatoes, cucumbers, peas, beans, carrots, all of those kinds of plants, we're looking at annual plants. And although these are delicious and nutritious and wonderful to grow, they are a lot of work. They require a lot of watering because in one growing season, the roots can't get that deep. And also we have to plant them year after year after year. So if we want to cut down on the amount of work that we want to do, we want to maybe interplant a little bit in our annual garden with some perennials. Now, perennials you could add into your regular garden could be things like herbs. So oregano, chives, mint, thyme, tarragon, all of those things will come back year after year. But we can also swap out perhaps more common vegetables that we'd be eating for something that's going to return every year. So for example, instead of planting spinach, which you may have to plant year after year, you could plant something like French sorrel. And French sorrel is a lemony spinach tasting perennial that will come up maybe in March or April every year, and you can usually harvest it right up until October. So that brings me to another point, is the fact that oftentimes the perennials that we're growing, we can eat for maybe 7 months out of the year, 6 months out of the year, instead of simply the 2 weeks when that plant produces if we're doing an annual plant. So where your garden spinach might be viable for 2, maybe 3 weeks if you're really lucky, if you keep it out of direct sunlight and you take off the seed heads so that it doesn't get bitter or old tasting, something like the French sorrel is going to be available to you for many more months of the year. Another substitution that you may want to make is something called lavage. And I use lavage instead of celery in most of my plantings for various reasons. So first of all, I find celery very difficult to grow. And because your one plant is going to make one stalk of, or one clump of celery, I don't even know what you want to call it, it's going to take a lot of effort to get something that you could buy in the store for maybe $3. So instead, I like something like lavage, where again, you can start harvesting it usually at the end of March or early April. You can harvest it right up until October, and it is a spectacular looking plant. It can grow up to about 6 feet tall. It kind of comes off of a central stalk like this, and so it's well behaved. It looks nice, and it just tastes like a really strong celery for the most part. So this plant I like to use in stir fries or use it as a substitution to celery, little pieces of it in salad, soup stock. It's fantastic, and you can chop it and freeze it, and it's just much, much easier because year after year it's going to come back, and it makes a really nice addition to your landscape because it looks pretty too. And the last point I want to make about the perennials versus annuals is the nutritional content. With any of the plants that we grow, our plants are only going to be as nutritious as the soil that they're planted in. If our soil is devoid of the nutrients and minerals that our body needs, our plants can't bring it up anyways. But typically when you have an annual garden bed, if we're not returning enough of the plant material, enough compost, enough of those nutrients into the soil, the topsoil layer where the annual plant's roots are going to be year after year are only going to access what's available in the soil. So if that soil gets depleted year after year by tilling, by just overplanting without returning anything to the soil, our plants aren't going to be able to take very many nutrients up because they're just not available, and therefore our bodies are going to become deficient in those nutrients as well. When you look at a perennial plant that has had years, maybe even decades worth of growth, their roots are going to be really, really deep down in the ground. And because their roots are so deep, they have access to so many different nutrients and minerals than our annual plants would have. So this makes it so that if those are available to our plants, they are therefore available to our bodies when we eat these plants. Also, a lot of these perennial plants are very often found in the wild, all over the place. So when we're harvesting things like wild foods that are perennial, we are harvesting some from over here and some from over here, and therefore getting a wide variety of different minerals and nutrients from these different places in the landscape as well.